So this video is about how everything we experience shows us where we want to go. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I think that so many of us have a tendency to categorize things that happen into sort of good things and bad things and positive things versus negative things. And so when it comes to the negative things, we think, okay, these are the things that went wrong, and these are the things that, I wish hadn't happened. Understandably, totally logical. But I think we think, these are the things that went wrong, and I didn't get anything from these things. And so, everything would be great if I could just go back and change those. When I think that actually, when it comes down to it, so many of the things that feel like they've gone wrong, they're not necessarily going wrong. Like, we actually, not only do we learn from them, but they tell us about the things that we want and the things that we don't want much more clearly. There also is often a massive tendency towards resentment and blame. And I understand that, and I know that we can all go through that period of time, right, where we do, at first, we're angry about something and we blame someone for it, and then we sort of move on past that. But I think that it happens a lot when we see, when we don't get what we want, or when we see other people who have the things that we want that we don't have yet. And so instead of trying to figure out how they got to that point where they have those things, and maybe trying to be happy about the fact that we can see that it's obviously doable because they've done it, instead there's a tendency, I think, in our society to blame that person and feel like that person having it is taking it away from you, and like there's some conspiracy to stop you from having it. I've experienced a lot of different things in my life, and in many ways I had a childhood that was so different to most of the people who I ended up knowing later on. I lived in various countries. When I was small, we lived in France, and then we moved to Spain, and we moved to Ireland, so I lived all over the place. And it was an incredible experience, and it was a great opportunity to be able to do that, and I experienced so many cultures and languages. But at the same time, a lot of people seem to think that it's really idealistic. I mean, the number of people that have said to me, even when I was much younger, even when I was still a child, that must have been so amazing. Of course it was, but it was like people thought that I'd been on holiday for the last 4 years living in Spain, and that was not what it was like at all. Growing up in France and Spain I was incredibly fortunate to be able to experience that, but I mean there were a lot of challenges to that as well. So there was learning the languages. So when I was small, when I was in France, I started school there, so I don't ever remember actively learning the language. But I remember going there and not speaking a word of Spanish. I think I had 2 words and that was it. And I was put in school and I had to deal with it. I had to learn. There was really no other option. And there were so many things that were amazing about living in those places, but then there were so many things that were really challenging, like, things being done differently and, leaving your friends behind when you've moved. Learning a totally new language absolutely from scratch, and having to do literally just starting in at the deep end, trying to do work in those languages, doing schoolwork, doing tests, whatever it was, without actually knowing the language, so really starting from the bottom. Strangely, one of the things that helped me to get really clear on what it was that I wanted was actually remembering how I felt as a child. Because I did have such an amazing childhood, and I had a very different childhood where I was exposed to a lot of different things and a lot of experiences. I remember when I was in France and I was very small, my parents used to, my parents had like this band going, this music band they had going. And so they used to play at the local pub, and they used to play with friends and things like that. And I really loved that. I loved being part of it. I loved that we had friends who would come over, and I was part of the adult conversations, and I just really felt part of life because my parents had their own things that they did. And then I just sort of, when I was born, I feel like I just integrated into it. So I did have a lot of experiences, and I did different things. And when I got older, I remembered that feeling of just feeling really alive and excited about everything, and feeling like there were just possibilities everywhere. And like everything felt new and exciting. And when I remembered that, I thought, God, I felt a bit sad at first that actually I felt like I had a more interesting life when I was about 4, than I was living now. But at the same time, it actually told me a lot about how I wanted to feel. When I figured that out, I thought, okay, I have 2 options. Either one, I resign myself to, the concept that this isn't what adult life is, and being an adult isn't supposed to be fulfilling, it's not supposed to be exciting, and I just resign myself to that and that's it. Or option 2, I actually connect with how it felt to live that, and to feel those feelings of everything being new and interesting, and I follow those feelings and I just see where it takes me. We just always have a choice. Either when we experience something negative, either we can hold on to that, and I know that every one of us, including me, have definitely done that. But there comes to a point where either you're going to keep holding on to it, and often either blaming other people or blaming yourself. I think often it's blaming yourself. Either you're gonna keep holding on to that, or you're gonna decide to let it go. You're gonna see what you learned from it, and you're going to find the opposite of that situation, and you're just going to go for that. There were things that happened in my life, like the experience I had in childhood, that really showed me the things that I wanted to repeat. And then there were times when I was sad about that because it wasn't what I was living now. But then I had a choice, right? I had a choice, about what it was that I was going to do with those feelings. And so there were things that I decided, okay, I like that part and that part of this particular period of my life, and I'm going to see what I can do to bring that back into my life now. And then there were things like lack of money and stuff like that, where I was like, okay, that's something that I definitely don't want to repeat. And then I have at times, but that sometimes that's been self-inflicted because of the choices that I've made, and often sacrifices that I've made, which I was willing to make. But yeah, I just think that everything that happens in our lives, every experience that we have, whether it's positive or negative, it really does have the ability to be really meaningful to us, because it shows us really clearly what we want and what we don't want, and it shows us where we're going and where we want to go. And I think that's incredibly important, and I don't think that there's much that's more important than that, than knowing who you want to be and what life you want to live.